Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of Project Blue Book's unknowns, the 701 UFO cases that the US Air Force could never explain. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. For 17 years, from 1947 to 1969, the United States Air Force ran an official program to investigate UFO reports. It was called Project Blue Book, and it collected 618 UFO reports from members of the public, military personnel, pilots, and scientists. The program had a clear mandate to determine whether UFOs posed a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze the phenomenon. And when it closed in December 1969, Project Blue Book had produced a definitive conclusion. Of the 618 cases investigated, 917 were explained as conventional phenomena, whether balloons, aircraft, astronomical objects, misidentifications. The remaining 701 cases, 5% of the total, were classified as unknown. They could not be explained. The Air Force had no explanation for them. And then the Air Force declared the program a success, announced there was nothing to investigate, and closed it. Project Blue Book's 701 unknowns are among the most important documents in the history of the UFO phenomenon. They represent cases that survived the investigation of professional Air Force analysts and civilian scientists. Cases where the witnesses were credible, the observations were detailed, the evidence was physical or photographic, and the available explanations simply did not fit. The Air Force's own scientists found them inexplicable. The University of Colorado study that was used to justify the program's closure, the Condon Report itself, found that a significant proportion of its cases were baffling, and that some cases appeared to have involved craft-like objects that defied conventional explanation. What happened to the 701 unknowns? They are in the National Archives, available for public examination, waiting to be explained. Researchers including J. Allen Hynek, who was Project Blue Book's scientific advisor for its entire duration, spent years after the program's closure arguing that the unknowns represented genuine evidence of anomalous phenomena that deserved continued scientific attention. Hynek's famous categorization system, close encounter of the first kind sighting, second kind physical effects, third kind beings observed, was developed from the Blue Book unknowns. The 701 cases that the US Air Force could not explain remain unexplained. The program that couldn't explain them was declared a success and closed. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The 20th and 21st centuries were supposed to be the age of answers. Science had decoded DNA, split the atom, put humans on the moon, and mapped the genome. By the logic of accelerating discovery, Every mystery should be converging toward explanation. And yet the ledger of genuinely unexplained phenomena, events witnessed by credible observers, investigated by serious researchers, and still lacking a satisfying account, has not shrunk. If anything, it has grown. Part of this is a failure of classification. Phenomena that do not fit established categories tend to be dismissed rather than investigated, filed under anecdotal or mass hysteria, and removed from serious consideration. This is not always wrong. Genuine hoaxes and misperceptions account for a large portion of anomalous reports. But the dismissal is sometimes premature, and the cost is real. Cases that might have yielded genuine insight are closed before they are fully examined. Witnesses are discredited. Evidence is lost. The question is never properly asked. The cases that endure, that survive rigorous scrutiny, and still refuse to yield to conventional explanation, are a small but significant set. They share certain characteristics: multiple independent witnesses, physical evidence consistent with witness testimony, and a complete absence of any plausible prosaic explanation that accounts for all the data. These are not ghost stories. They are open problems in empirical science, waiting for someone with the right tools and the intellectual courage to take them seriously. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Project Blue Book's unknowns, the 701 UFO cases that the US Air Force could never explain, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Project Blue Book was the third and most extensive official USAF UFO investigation program. Following Project Sign, 1948, and Project Grudge, 1949-1951. Blue Book was established in 1952 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, under the direction of a series of Air Force officers, most notably Captain Edward Ruppelt, who ran the program in its early years. The program received UFO reports through a nationwide reporting network, investigated significant cases in the field, and maintained a central archive of all reports and investigations. The archive was declassified and transferred to the National Archives in 1976. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the official criteria for classifying a case as unknown were relatively strict. A case was classified as unknown only if the witness or witnesses were credible and reliable, if sufficient information about the sighting existed to conduct a meaningful analysis, and if the analysis could not assign the observation to any conventional category. This means the 701 unknowns are not cases of obviously credulous or unreliable witnesses. They are cases where the Air Force's own investigators, applying professional standards, found the evidence sufficiently compelling and the conventional explanations sufficiently inadequate to decline classification. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine J. Allen Hynek, 1910–1986, was the astronomer and astrophysicist who served as scientific consultant to Project Blue Book from 1948 to 1969. He was initially a debunker. He famously dismissed some Blue Book cases as swamp gas in a 1966 press conference, but his long engagement with the evidence gradually shifted his position. By the time Blue Book closed, Hynek had become convinced that the unknown cases represented genuine evidence of anomalous phenomena deserving serious scientific investigation. After Blue Book closed, he founded the Center for UFO Studies, UFOs, in Chicago in 1973 and developed the Close Encounter classification system used by researchers worldwide. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the Condon Report, 1969, formerly scientific study of unidentified flying objects produced by the University of Colorado under Dr. Edward Condon, was commissioned by the Air Force to provide independent scientific justification for closing Project Blue Book. The report was controversial even when it was released. The report's executive summary concluded that UFO investigation was unproductive, but the body of the report contained individual case analyses in which many cases were described as puzzling or unexplained. Physicist James McDonald argued that the report's methodology was flawed and that its case analyses actually provided stronger evidence for anomalous phenomena than its conclusions acknowledged. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of, among the most significant Blue Book unknown cases are the 1952 Washington, D.C. National Airport radar sightings, multiple radar confirmations of UFOs over the Capitol, the 1964 Lonnie Zamora Socorro, New Mexico landing case, examined separately in this batch, the 1966 Ann Arbor, Michigan series that triggered Hynek's controversial swamp gas explanation, and multiple cases involving military aircraft pursuing UFOs that escaped with maneuvers impossible for any known aircraft. Some of the most credible unknowns involve simultaneous ground radar and air radar tracking of the same object, providing dual-system electronic confirmation. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the decision to close Project Blue Book was influenced significantly by the political embarrassment the program caused. The 1952 Washington, D.C. sightings, which generated enormous public attention and scrambled jet interceptors, were a visible public relations problem. The 1957 wave of sightings across multiple states created similar pressure. Each major wave of UFO reports generated public and congressional interest that the Air Force found difficult to manage. The closure of Blue Book was partly a response to this political pressure. It was easier to declare the phenomenon unworthy of investigation than to continue managing the public and congressional attention that each major wave of unknowns produced. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Project Blue Book's unknowns. the 701 UFO cases that the US Air Force could never explain. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the extraterrestrial intelligence theory holds that a significant portion of the Blue Book unknowns represent observations of genuine craft operated by non-human intelligence, most likely extraterrestrial in origin. Under this theory, the Air Force's own documented inability to explain the unknowns using conventional categories is itself the most important evidence, since it represents the finding of the US government's own experts. The consistent characteristics of the best unknown cases: high speed, radical maneuverability, unusual shape. Electromagnetic effects on aircraft electronics are consistent with technology far beyond human capability at the time of observation. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the classified technology theory proposes that many Blue Book unknowns were observations of classified American or Soviet aircraft and technology that could not be officially identified without compromising security. Under this model, Project Blue Book served partly as a convenient cover for classified programs. UFO reports from areas near nuclear facilities, test ranges, and classified aircraft test sites could be filed as unknowns without revealing what was actually being observed. This theory explains some proportion of the unknowns, but cannot account for cases with characteristics: multiple independent radar confirmations, 90-degree turns at high speed that exceed any known human technology. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the atmospheric and geophysical phenomenon theory holds that many of the unknowns represent unusual but natural atmospheric phenomena: plasma formations, ball lightning, atmospheric optical effects that were not understood in the 1950s, and that have since been better characterized. Under this model, the unknowns don't represent either extraterrestrial craft or classified military technology, but rather a gap in atmospheric science that has since been partly closed. Critics note that some unknowns, particularly those involving structured craft with windows, landing legs, and beings, are not adequately explained by atmospheric phenomena, regardless of their rarity. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Project Blue Book's unknowns, the 701 UFO cases that the US Air Force could never explain, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the Project Blue Book files, now available at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, and in digitized form online through the National Archives Digitization Project, constitute the primary physical evidence. The files include original witness reports, investigator notes, photographic evidence, radar data, and the analytical conclusions for all 618 cases. The 701 unknown case files can be read and evaluated by any researcher, providing an unusual level of transparency for a government investigation of anomalous phenomena. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented radar confirmation cases among the Blue Book unknowns provide physical evidence independent of witness testimony. In cases where a UFO was simultaneously tracked by multiple radar systems, ground radar and airborne radar, while also being observed visually by aircraft crews, the convergence of independent detection methods provides strong evidence for a real physical object. The 1952 Washington, D.C. cases, which were tracked by 3 separate radar systems simultaneously while being observed by multiple crews, are among the most evidentially robust cases in the Blue Book archive. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. Scientific analysis by qualified researchers of specific Blue Book unknown cases has confirmed that the conventional explanations offered by Blue Book investigators were sometimes inadequate. Astronomer Donald Menzel's debunking explanations for many cases, which used atmospheric optical effects as universal explanations, were analyzed by physicist James McDonald, who found that Menzel's explanations often required physical conditions that were inconsistent with actual atmospheric science. McDonald's analyses, presented at scientific conferences and published in peer-reviewed form, provided independent scientific confirmation that some Blue Book unknowns were genuinely without conventional explanation. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Project Blue Book's unknowns, the 701 UFO cases that the US Air Force could never explain. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Project Blue Book's legacy is most visible in the continuation of official UFO investigation by U.S. government entities. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AARP, which operated from 2007 to 2012 with $22 million in funding, was effectively a classified successor to Blue Book. The UAP Task Force 2020-2022 and its successor, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARO, established in 2022, continue the official investigation of UAP, the current government-preferred terminology for what Blue Book called UFOs, with more resources and broader mandate than AARP. The 701 Blue Book unknowns have been periodically reanalyzed by researchers using modern methods. A UFOs analysis in the 2000 found that the unknowns showed systematic patterns in their geographic distribution, clustering near military installations and nuclear sites. Temporal distribution, waves in 1952, 1957, 1965, and 1968-69. And physical characteristics, high speed, unusual maneuverability, electromagnetic effects that are not characteristic of conventional misidentifications. This systematic pattern analysis, unavailable to Blue Book analysts who lacked modern statistical tools, suggests that the unknowns represent not random, unexplained cases, but a structured phenomenon with consistent physical properties. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Project Blue Book's unknowns, the 701 UFO cases that the U.S. Air Force could never explain from the historical record. Through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Project Blue Book ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.